Lounge with Travify Academy, where we get to hear from travel industry voices and experts to learn more about their story and also what they see on the horizon for travel professionals. And I'm Stephanie Grice, and our guest today is Mary Charleson, who's marketing educator, speaker, and strategist at 5 Minute Marketing. And I'm so excited to introduce you and have you here today. So welcome to the Lounge, Mary, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks, Stephanie. I'm glad we were able to pull this together. And
I know.
yeah,
It is. It's super fun. And so we got to meet at Travel Agent Forum in Las Vegas this March. So now we're like, what day is it? What time?
yeah.
It's May already. It's insane. But you were speaking right before I went. So I got to hear your speaking. I was like, oh my gosh, she needs to get on the podcast. So I'm really glad this worked out. This is exciting.
Yeah. No, this is excellent. And then we had a super chat on the showroom floor and kind of flushed out a couple ideas what we could focus in on. So yeah, just the synergy was good. So yeah.
It's so true. I know. And so that's why I'm so excited for this conversation today, too. It's going to be really helpful for all of our listeners. So if you were a travel agent foreman, you got to hear Mary speak, you probably got a glimpse into a lot of the great expertise, but more to come here today. I'm super excited. But before we get into all that, can you just first share just more about yourself and how did you find yourself in the travel industry and doing marketing?
Well, thanks for asking the question. I'll do my best to not try and share the entire life story as told by my mother or something. But I mean, I've been working as a marketing consultant, speaker, writer in the space of marketing specifically for 20 plus years, and that was as you said at 5minutemarketing.com. I launched Carry On Queen as a content writing platform in around 2018 to kind of bring together my two passions. I mean, that's the most recent way that we kind of came together. But, the history goes way, way back. I mean, I can think like even in my undergrad years, went to the University of Waterloo in Ontario. My undergrad thesis was looking at travel advertising, comparing, impressions of Canada, because I'm Canadian, of Canada to both Canadian travelers as well as American travelers and how we were perceived as differently. Basically Moose Mountains and Mounties was the theme back then. But even after that in MBA, working on projects in basically kind of travel, recreation, and leisure, did some things, with Whistler Blackcomb, was always that thread. And then worked in the travel, or excuse me, the media side, with the newspaper, then went agency side, again, often working with travel, recreation, leisure clients. And so it's kind of been a thread throughout all of that. And so with 5minutemarketing.com, I've worked as a consultant, often with small business entrepreneurs, many times in that travel kind of industry. But, the thing really kind of came together when with Carry On Queen. And so I'd been a travel writer on the side for years. I've been a writer. I was, published a couple of marketing books. I think we got them over here on the side, 5minutemarketing.com and word of mouth, mouse and mobile. But I was a, marketing columnist, HuffPost, business in Vancouver. Like I was always writing. And so I wanted to pull that together, take what I knew in marketing, apply it to travel industry, Carry On Queen, creating content. And it was really there that, when I started to immerse myself a little bit more into the conferences for travelers. So the DMOs, the, travel agents, the travel content creators with TBEX, TMAC, Trav Media. That's where I really got to see kind of where there was actually opportunity at the intersection of my two brands, where I could really kind of help the industry. And then, of course, COVID hit, right? Everything kind of went sideways, but then as we all know, with travel agents, everybody needed help, and even more so. And it's kind of the renaissance of travel agents, really. I mean, coming out of COVID, people realized just how much it's needed. And so that's really, and so I really kind of have focused in there. Then speaking, consulting in that industry, I created a couple of online courses for travel agents, one around earning media publicity, another one around social media. We can put that in the show notes. It's basically 5minutemarketing.com/courses. And, we can go into some of the details on those, but that's a bit of a synopsis. Along the way, I've, I work as a not work, it's volunteer with US Travel in the ESTO Awards. I'm a lead judge last couple of years. So I've been getting more into helping around marketing in the industry, right? So that's it's probably longer than you wanted, but it's it's the short version.
No, I love that. I think it's so amazing how the travel industry, first of all, is just amazing. And it's really funny too how so many people find their way in based like it could either be, I just like travel and realized that people were asking me for suggestions. And so that's how I started selling it. Or like you, it's like I loved writing, I love travel. And so that came together. And then the marketing piece. And it's so amazing. And you're right that, there's been so many new advisors entering the industry the past few years, but also just a lot of advisors who already were, selling travel. They realized after COVID, during COVID, hey, I need to take a better look at my marketing, get better strategy around this and really utilize it to its full potential. So it's so true that what you said about once COVID hit, it's kind of like this thing just like kind of happened. It
Hmm.
just grew bigger and all of that. And so that's the one thing too that I know those listening, the travel advisors, marketing is, it can be a lot. It's also really like for people like me, you, we like marketing. Like it's really fun, but it still is actually not the easiest thing because you have so many different things. And now you have new things like AI, you have all these different social media channels, you have all of these, you have videos, you have all of these opportunities out there, and it gets extremely overwhelming. So I know you put together a rule of three, and I really want to bring that up because that's what we were talking about in the trade show floor, and I was like, this is brilliant, like I love this. So can you explain how marketing can be simplified down for travel advisors, how you view it?
Okay, so uh, the concept of the rule of three really kind of comes out of packing and packing strategically. So hopefully this will sort of ring true for a number of people, and potentially if you're an overpacker, it has some parallels to trying to do too much and not really well across the board in your marketing. So the rule of three kind of goes like this. So we'll talk about it as a packing, and then we'll do the parallels to travel. So in packing, and I've always been, as I said, the carry-on queen, right? I only ever took a carry-on, not a checked bag. And this is before COVID, before it became kind of cool to be the carry-on person. I was the one, right? That was like, I will not part with my bag. But that also means that you have to pack extremely efficiently. So I call the rule of three, basically, you get three of any item when you're packing. So three pairs of shoes, three shirts, three pants, three. When you're down to three, you realize these things all have to work together or they don't get into the bag. They've got to be multi-purpose. Like this shirt has to work with a couple of different outfits. It can be really challenging with footwear, let me tell you. But you've got to be kind of ruthless with it. You actually technically get the fourth if you're wearing the fourth thing, obviously. So the same thing kind of applies to your marketing, is that if you get kind of ruthless with what you allow into the bag, like a packing cube, but you utilize it really well and it all works together, then that's where the magic happens. The other thing is making sure it's just like with clothing, right? Making sure you pick the right items for the audience or where the time where you're going, where you're spending your time. And same thing with your marketing, right? Choose it well, defined on who your target audience is and where you're hanging out and what you want it to accomplish. So there's a lot of parallels, I call it, between packing efficiently and also kind of packing your bag for marketing. So what I always say with this kind of strategy is to pick well and then use it to its maximum, right? What I see so often are agents, not even just travel agents, people, a lot of marketers in general, are trying to do a little bit of everything. It's like, okay, I'm on Facebook and I'm doing posts, but I'm not doing reels. I'm not doing any of the rest. Oh, I'm on Instagram because I was told I need to do short form video. So I'm doing that instead of that. Somebody else said, oh my God, you got to be on TikTok. So like they're on TikTok and they're doing a few things, but they're not really getting traction on a lot of those things. They're collecting emails, but they're not really doing anything with the emails. Somebody said, oh my God, groups are where it's at. You've got to have a group. It's all about community. So it's like, okay, then they start a group and then they just kind of abandon it. Does any of this sound ring true?
Yes, that's what I hear all the time. And even just for us, like I'm just even thinking about even just like Travify doing marketing, like you always want to try the new thing. You know, you always want to, you hear something, you're like, oh, let's try that. And it takes you away from what actually could be working.
And you know, there's if you have the time, there is absolutely nothing wrong with trying the new thing. But it's all about taking time away. I mean, at the end of the day, you're in the business of selling travel, right? Or selling experiences, depending on, you know, if you're agent side or, you know, on the destination side. And that's you're not in the business of posting on social media or scrolling on social media pretending that it's marketing, because I mean that's the other caution there, is that you know you end up spending time and you pop your head up at 45 minutes later and you've been entertained by videos. You haven't been doing any work, right? And we all
So
know how this
true.
works.
Yes.
We all
Yeah.
know how this works, and the algorithms are super smart, and that's what they're doing, and they're trying to keep people on there so that they can then put ad content in there. I mean, there's a reason why Facebook and, you know, Meta's had record profits, right? Ad revenues are up. So the rule of three really tries to get you to kind of focus in. So I mean, let's just sort of like take a list of possibilities, and then I'll pull a combination. So I mean, we could have an e-newsletter, an email newsletter. We could have you know, really focus on website content and SEO, being found in search for your particular, you know, whether it be destination or your particular passion for river cruising, whatever it is. It could be going out and earning free media and publicity, right? That could be another kind of tactic. Social media, and I realize that's a big umbrella. So within social media, what I advocate is pick one or two platforms and do them well, right? As your primary. You can dabble a little bit in other stuff if you've got the time, but one or two, do them well, right? For a lot of agents, it's either Facebook or Instagram, depending on kind of the age demographic of who their primary audience is. Then you can add, right? Either the Instagram or the Facebook as the other one, possibly the TikTok, possibly, you know, Pinterest, YouTube, LinkedIn, right? I mean, there's many different things you could add, but focus in on one, do it well to its full capacity. Um, Influencers, right? There's another whole other vertical, which is kind of coming into play. And not just even just like, you know, person influencers. I mean, AI, we can dive into AI. I mean, we're getting into like AI influencers, and like there's some crazy stuff that's coming down the tube. Paid ads, that's another vertical, right? Sponsorship, you know, targeted database and email sequences. I mean, the options are endless. That's pretty daunting, right? And what I just read through, there's probably a few agents that are going, yeah, I'm doing that. I'm doing all that, but it's not working, right? And so it's probably because your suitcase is overstuffed, your outfits don't coordinate. Half of them got worn once and never again on the trip, right? And they never actually accomplish what you were wanting to do, because it's all at the top of the funnel, all about awareness, and you're not getting people down into engagement and et cetera. So out of that three, like let's just say you had your newsletter and you focused on your newsletter. So you've been gathering emails. You've got emails and you're sending this out. And the big thing with newsletters is consistency, and I believe giving without expectation of return. Not everybody agrees with that on e-newsletters, but you know, so not just all about pitching and selling, giving advice, giving, you know, just being top of mind awareness, and then making them aware of, you know, what you're selling too, but not just like, oh my God, here's what's on sale, right? Make it a bit more engaging. So let's just say it was an e-newsletter paired with a private Facebook group where you are actively engaged, but you've also grown the group to the point where the group members are more like a community. And you're the person that is, you know, the specialist in that particular area. You know, Club Med fanatics, Tahiti groups. I mean, there's endless ones that are out there, but you nurture that group. And then, you know, in events, right? Maybe you're doing, you know, face-to-face events and online events. You know, I think Jen Hendrickson, I think I mentioned in one of my presentations, she does that combination extremely well. She does a few other things, but those are her three packing cubes: events, Facebook group, and e-newsletter. And she has a very loyal following. And it's not as much about growing and getting more people she gets more people because they tend to bring people in, but she's also getting more business from her existing clientele, right? So, that's another piece of this is understanding, once you've got this group of people, this audience is nurturing that along. You don't always have to be in acquisition mode. You can increase your sales through, referrals and getting more out of, that existing base. Another combination could, private Facebook group, doing Facebook posts, reels, right? Really kind of taking advantage of the algorithm, or it could be, or on Instagram doing reels, the algorithm, getting exposure through that, your private Facebook group, and say publicity and going out. I know Susan Green has been doing a bang up job with that. She's been getting a lot of TV appearances. I don't know if you've kind of seen some of that. Follow her on her social media, but she's been getting, it's traditional media, yes, maybe, but I do believe it probably aligns well with her audience, but she's able then to leverage that out on her social channels. And all of a sudden it elevates, right? It's like, oh, she's in the media, she's being quoted, she's talking about trends, she's talking about deals, right? Yes, does she do more than this? But those are, kind of three packing cubes that all work together because that media feeds social. She's got content she puts out there, the Facebook group. She's got, she's talking to her people. Then she knows that group of people, that industry. She can talk about it in her earned media publicity. You see how this all kind of threads together?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love this. This actually, it makes me so excited actually about like with avenues of marketing because it just organizes it in your, not only like organizes everywhere, but in your brain. It just makes it feel more feasible. Like just thinking about it. I do have one question though. I wonder if other people are thinking this as they listen is how do you, so you have your 3 packing cubes. How do you usually say that you should strategize the time you spend on those, the main 3 things versus all the other things you need to upkeep? Because like an example that I can think of is, let's say you do have the Facebook group and the first example you gave, but yet you still have like an Instagram or like a normal Facebook, and so you still want to have stuff there. So how do you recommend managing the little side things, the extra parts outside of that? Or is it kind of like, don't really just focus on those 3?
I would say focus on your primary and then take the next most important secondary. So maybe let's say that's your Instagram and you go, okay, and in Instagram, I know the algorithm is really favoring short form video reels. And they keep on also making some changes around the algorithm. I know right now, as an example, it's actually favoring just the content, not so much the number of followers. So for people who may not have a huge number of followers, depending on the content they're sharing, if it takes off, right? Facebook is going to, or excuse me, Meta is going to be putting that out to the Instagram audience, even more so. So you might go, okay, for acquisition and awareness and reach, my secondary one is going to be to add in Instagram. I know I can't do all of the things on Instagram to make it my primary. I can't, but I am going to devote a secondary focus on Reels. And so allow whatever time period that is, once or twice a week, right? Throw, a couple things in there. Or maybe it's you say, you know what, the thing I have time for there is stories because I do have an audience I want to nurture. I want to give them a bit of the back. Stories are great for kind of the background story, the insider scoop, right? For the, and because it tends to give, kind of nurtures your existing audience. And so maybe that's what you do. And sort of, and then as time allows. Um, so that would be the kind of the way I would handle it is try to compartmentalize it. Honestly, the single biggest challenge with this is as soon as you go onto those platforms is you forget that you're not actually working when you're scrolling content. And I realize for some of them it's necessary, right? Like you can't just kind of drop into TikTok and kind of post, like you've got to be, got to know what trends are. Like so honestly, it's really hard to just kind of drop in, right? And manage your time, if it's not your primary. So I just think it's so important to try to time manage it and compartmentalize it, because it's so easy to get distracted and just spend all your time just piecemealing so many things. The one thing I will say though, is with all these algorithms, I love social media. I also kind of hate social media. It's kind of a love-hate
It
relationship. As
is.
yeah, I love what you can do with marketing. I don't necessarily like what it's doing to society or people's mental health. That aside, it's the algorithms are always changing. And so if you can uh, try, if you're take advantage of where they're giving you the most exposure and reach, but realize that it's always going to be shifting and changing to their benefit, not necessarily to yours. And at the end of the day, I would really uh, strongly implore people to have their own database, to be able to own the ability to connect with people directly. So email, right? I mean, it sounds a little old school, but it is super, super effective. If you've got a Facebook group, making sure that when they join the Facebook group, you're getting that email, you have a way to kind of funnel them into, maybe an email follow-up sequence. Thanks for joining. Here's what the group is about. Here's what I was just consulting with a client. I actually met him at the Vegas show. We just had our first consultation call. And because he came up right after the talk, he said, "Do you do consulting? Like I really want to talk about some things." So it took a little while to kind of get our calendars to align. But just some of the things that we talked about there were low-hanging fruit, right? You've got a Facebook group, but like making sure you're gathering those emails from that, right? You've got them coming in from your website, but you're not necessarily getting them from your sign up. And then being smart about not just using that to send out your newsletter, but also doing some sequences, follow-up sequences, and nurturing people from kind of that top of the line awareness, getting them down through the funnel of trust. And there's it's so often we don't maximize what we've got. I think that's another piece.
That's so important. That's actually what I was going to ask is the time managing, and you covered all that. It is, depending on what you're going to get into, because exactly what you're saying with the Facebook group, we have a Facebook group for Travefy. And I cannot tell you how many times I will get in there and then realize like 45 minutes, an hour later, because I'm looking and I'm responding. And so I do wonder, it is really important probably too to think about it in a time management perspective also, because I know a lot of our listeners can be part-time too, like they're not full-time yet and they're still growing their business. So maybe there's certain things that or if you're, as long as you're aware, maybe that's it too, is just being completely aware. But I love that you mentioned about the email collecting, like Facebook group, because that makes so much sense. You can just ask that question when they're coming in, like what is their email? And that's also because I agree, email marketing is so big, because I remember someone told me one time, they're like, if you have something to share, like, you just have something, like you need to get it out today and you just have this really great thing to share. Well, if you don't have an email list, like how do you get that out to people? Because if you just put that on social media, it could get lost really quick, all this. But if you have an email list, you have people. And so that's always stuck with me. And I'm like, wow, that's actually really true, that's your group of people that you always can access, which is
Right.
cool.
It's interesting. I've had an email newsletter, 5-minute marketing tips. I've done it since 2008,
Wow.
weekly. Occasionally there's been a couple weeks that have combined in there. Like I usually try to back it up if I'm going away and whatnot. But it's been the single best piece of marketing I've ever done. And there's the people that it's because you're top of mind. It's and it's interesting. Like I'll ask for engagement and ask what do you think of this? And people will email back, and then I monitor it. It comes out on Sunday mornings. Um, it's tips given with, I call it given without expectation of return, but it returns tenfold because it's top of mind. People will call you up and they'll say, I've got this kind of issue, and like to do some consulting around this project. Or I'll get a call from somebody I don't even know, and they'll say, so and so recommended that I contact you. They love your e-newsletter, and I'm like, I have to actually look the name up on the list because they've never engaged with me. They're the lurker, right? They're the lurker that's been getting this thing. And so that's, email can be incredibly valuable because it becomes it's one way permission. Now I'm and there's a lot of people that do abuse email, right? Where they treat it just as a blast list, a sales list. And I do think that that will wear your customers out. But if you are sharing something, like maybe you share some things, some travel trends, or you make it fun and amusing, right? Travel disaster stories from moms abroad with kids under 10 or something, right? And if that's your target audience, and meanwhile maybe you're selling, family travel packages, but you always have a funny story at the beginning of your newsletter. And so, and you get your audience to share as an example. So it becomes this thing where people go, okay, it's entertaining. Like I have to read this. Oh, and by the way, then I saw the deal. Maybe it applies or not. But at the end of that, it's like that person is now top of mind, right? There's just an example. And so, thinking about that content from the perspective of who is your target audience, what's going to resonate with them, right? Maybe you've got, kind of young boomers, Gen X kind of thing. The kids have kind of launched, but not really. They're bouncing back to the house after their degrees. There's a lot of those out there, right? So maybe you have some funny kind of just musings about that, right? At the beginning. And then, if you're looking to escape, but you have a built-in house sitter, I have a deal for you, right?
Lucky you.
Yeah,
You get
exactly.
to
So
leave and your
it,
house is okay.
exactly. Somebody will take care of the dog and the plants, right? And so, but I'm just this is the kind of stuff I love doing with clients is brainstorming and riffing and going like, okay, who's your target audience? What do they care about outside of travel, right? How can we use that to make the way you speak to them relevant and then weave it into travel? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
As opposed to just like, oh my God, I've got this cruise to sell. Boom, here's the deal. Why aren't they responding? Right? Like just understanding how to create the relationship, the engagement, and then frankly having the opportunity to sell because you've created the relationship. And whether that be online, whether it be through social media, whether it be through events, right? E-newsletters, right? There's so many tactics for that.
That's awesome. I love that. And it also just makes it feel real. We're marketed to all constantly,
Mm.
like pretty much almost like every second. I feel like if you are online or do like you're getting marketed. And when someone actually is telling a story or being real, you can see their personality. It's way different. So I love that. That's such an important point.
Well, and people buy from those that they know, like, and trust, right? But they feel like they get me. They're like,
Hmm.
they're like me. And that's it, and you can do it in so many different ways, through your branding, through your content, where it just feels like you're buying from a friend. And that's ultimately, I mean, that's where a travel advisor wants to end up, where you have a relationship with a client. It's not like you're selling all the time. It's a relationship where you're a trusted advisor who's, also almost like a friend who they're going to take care of you. Um, you're going to get repeat business, you're going to get referral business, and more than anything, you're also not going to get the people who are constantly looking for the deals. It's not that you're not going to be trying to find your clients the best deals, but they're just you get beyond the part in the relationship where you're just asking about price all the time. That's really not where you want to be. You want to be where they just trust that you've done your research and you're making this recommendation, and me knowing you, Stephanie, this is what I think is best for you. And you're like, okay, um, where do I sign?
Yeah, it makes it
Right?
way better situation
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
advisor and the client. So yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
so true. And so I have to ask you another question because I was going
Yeah.
to ask like more on like trends that you're seeing, but you
Mm.
mentioned this earlier, AI influencers. I don't know what that is and I'm dying to know.
Okay, so it's really interesting. When I was at this, I mentioned to you, I can't remember if we mentioned it as part of the recorded intro or when we were just kind of riffing away at the beginning, but I was recently at marketing retreat. It was a retreat for marketers, marketing thought leaders with Mark Schaefer in Tennessee. It's called The Uprising. And so it's an opportunity for thought leaders, but also, industry, like think of it as a whole bunch of keynoters in one room with a bunch of really trusted kind of sources of research. And so just talking about the way that AI is accelerating, and the actual thing that AI will do is accelerating, but it's the rate of acceleration is like the hockey stick, to use a very Canadian.
Yeah, it is.
Go Canucks, go. Um, the rate of acceleration is really the big thing there. But this idea of AI content and AI influencers. So that I mean, brands have like to be able to work with influencers, right? People who will create content, who will be who will get things out to their audience, right? I mean, destinations brands deal with this all the time, but there's this notion of creating basically like an AI influencer, like somebody who's basically it's an artificially created person. It first took off during the pandemic when you couldn't get people in these certain locations, right? And so they created these, they looked very, realistic, right? And so a creature, a creature, but it was a thing that they needed to do to be able, and they said this is AI, but it was so crazy and new. People are like, wow, okay. And she's actually walking on the streets of Paris, and it's like, how is that even possible? Because there's a pandemic, right? Like, so is this whole thing, but it's created this other interesting little vertical where if you think about it, then the brands, the agency, it's like they don't have to deal with the personality of the influencer, kind of like, oh, I don't really want to do that. Well, I'd really like, there's no negotiation. They kind of create the bot and the bot does the work. Now, whether, fictional kind of the AI influencer personality or just the AI generated content that has influence, I think that's probably a little bit more of a realistic kind of version of this. Not actually putting the face as much to it. Maybe it's the person who heads the account, right? They're fictional, but there's their content, right? And so I think we will start to see more of this kind of stuff happening. Um, it's yeah, the line between reality and fiction starts to get really kind of weird. Which does it represent opportunity? Yes. But I also think it represents a whole lot of opportunity for people who are just real and human. And this whole idea of a personal connection, which is where I come full circle to, email events, right? Knowing your customers, your clients, as we enter a world which is so, because we will get the ramp up of content. We're already seeing it, but just, the ability to generate so much. And so when it's coming from a real person, someone that like, and trust, I think there's going to be a lot of equity in that. And so honestly, I would be investing in those connections, creating your communities, like your groups. I think there's a lot of benefit from having that human connection.
That's wild. That no, it's so true. And that's the thing too. Well, first of all, that is really crazy. And now I'm like, have I been following any AI? I maybe have been. Wouldn't even know. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
Like that is so intriguing. It's very fascinating. But it is so true that I know like I personally really like AI because it always helps me under like think of content and get me on a starting point usually when I'm trying to create content, which is really helpful and allows me to speed up the process. But I know a lot of people are also, terrified. You mentioned this about AI, but I think you nailed it on the head that that's exactly what it is yes, there's more content being created, but now people are really quickly going to be able to see what's really real and what's not. And you are the one that can provide the realness. So I think that's such an important thing that building that community is going to be really important.
You know what? And here's another interesting thing that we hadn't actually counted on talking about here, but as I'm talking, reflecting on the time in Tennessee, um, Ed Keller. I don't know if you know Ed Keller, kind of the father of word of mouth marketing. He was one of the guys that was there, and so I mean, I was like a worshiper of Ed Keller's work all
Yeah.
my career. It's like, oh my God, I'm like sitting here having dinner with Ed Keller, and I'm playing, ping pong and whatever. And, but he was sharing some interesting stuff, and I think it's worthy in this environment of AI, talking about the amount of word of mouth that happens online and offline. And so we think of online word of mouth as being so important. And the reality is that 80% is from his research, 80% of word of mouth actually happens offline, right? Interesting. And the other interesting piece of it is that when it's offline face to face, it tends to be skews more positive because it's usually shared as advice, right? And if I'm trying to help you, I'm speaking to you, I'm more likely to share with you stuff that I found beneficial and helpful. So it's positive. Online, kind of word of mouth, right? There's a little bit of both, right? It tends to kind of hit the fringes of like, oh my God, I love it. Oh my God, I hate it, right? Like it's kind of the extremes. And so they've done research on this through the 80s, the 90s, and and it's held true by and large. And so the idea that word of mouth, so if you can, I mean, you can be doing things online that kind of help with that awareness, but if people are talking about you in a positive light, sharing that information offline, there's a lot of marketing leverage that comes with that. And so, that's something, especially for agents, with that whole, having that personal connection. I think that's something, it's a little old school, but it's worthy to be reminded of. Right. I talked about that in my most recent e-newsletter. You know what I could do? I mean, after we're finished the call, I haven't got it out as a blog post yet, but I could either share it as a blog post link or my e-newsletter link because it goes into more of the details, which I
Yeah.
think might be interesting to kind of follow up on.
I think that's great. Yeah, that's really amazing because I always think that too with a word of mouth marketing, just especially in the business of travel advisors, that it really is because that's how you want to keep talking and if we're talking, I'm like, oh, you want to
Mhm.
go there? I know somebody who can help. Like
Mhm.
we did this and explaining and so important. And yeah, I can put that in the show notes after this when you can get that. I was also going to ask too, is what are the resources or how can people find you online and like what resources would you suggest?
Okay, so my 5minutemarketing.com, so FIVE minute marketing.com is my main website. And when you get there, like the landing page on the website is basically the blog. And so there is content there that dates, as I say, it goes back to 2008. And so it's all marketing tips, strategy. It's all there. There's an e-newsletter sign up, as I said. I every Sunday morning. I have it, comes off the 5minutemarketing.com site. I've got the travel industry version, which is kind of my e-news group that came out of the travel agents or travel show marketing group, Vegas show. I sort of repurposed that same content to them. I usually put a little bit more of a travel spin on it, but honestly, you can sign up for either of them, and you'll basically get the basic content. I think I mentioned to you there's also that 5minutemarketing.com/courses, right? And that's where you'll be able to see the two. There's the one on, I got to get the right names of them. So it's basically earned media publicity, right? How to get free media is one of them, and the other one is on social media marketing for travel agents. So they're specific to the travel industry in terms of content.
That's awesome. Oh man, I have so many great resources that are going to come on those show notes, everybody. So that is incredible. But before we wrap up here, I didn't tell you this before, but we
Okay.
like to do travel rapid fire questions.
Okay.
You're ready. They're all travel related. Yeah,
Okay.
I was like, I always like try to just
Yes.
pull a fast one on you, just be like,
Yeah.
hey, really quick, we're gonna
Yeah.
ask.
It wouldn't be
But
an
yeah,
interview without an unexpected question.
exactly. And they're all travel related for our carry
Yeah.
on queen. So I'm
Okay.
excited for your answers
Excellent.
here.
Yeah, and I was going to say, that was the other resource. We'll make sure that we send them
Yes.
to, because that's all the adventure travel. Because it's basically adventure travel for the over 50 is kind of the target audience. So,
So
yeah,
cool.
we'll make sure we do that one.
Yes, I love that. I will put that link in there. But for
Okay.
your travel related question, so there is six of them.
Okay.
First one is what is your favorite travel movie?
Travel movie. Oh my gosh. Uh,
I'm
I,
stumping
I
you
know it's
already.
so it's so cliche, the old eat pray love thing with Julia Roberts, but
I know it's
honestly
so
it was,
good.
I mean it's I mean there's, I mean destination movies, you know, I love looking at all movies to sort of say, was where was that filmed? Oh, okay. It's like, and I mean half the things, like that's not Seattle, that's Vancouver, right? But just I love anything that's got sort of, you know, destination scenery. But honestly, the it was a little cliche, but it was indicative of so many people's journey of personal growth as traveling. And so there's a piece of me back in my 20s, or you know, or even trying to find themselves later in life, that really kind of resonated with that one. So you know, I just Julia Roberts is fun too. So
It is a classic. Agreed with you. Oh, I love it so much too. It's so good.
yeah.
So another question here is, what is your favorite destination you traveled to?
Gosh, you know, that is very difficult
Yeah.
to say. You know, I love Europe. I love hiking. I mean, Dolomites hiking is spectacular. It's so different than any other geographic area. Love traveling in Australia. I've been, you know, surfing. I just came back from doing a surf camp in the Dominican Republic. You know, I think it really kind of falls into whether you're doing kind of adventure travel activity based, or where you're trying to sort of get more of a culture and historical experience. Not to say that I don't try to get a bit of each on every piece of travel, right? I'm always interested in the history, the culture of a destination. I would be unlikely to go somewhere exclusively only to do that. Like I always look for the crazy activity that might be able to go along with it. So um I would say, you know, it, then I'm thinking, wait a minute, Mary, what about, you know, South America, Machu Picchu, some crazy stuff you've done in Nicaragua, right? Like it's just like every place that you've gone is a favorite for different reasons. Sometimes it's because of the unexpected and the great stories that maybe not then, but you know, in telling later are the things that make it memorable, right? The girlfriend that gets a scorpion stuck in her running shoe, you know, it's you know, there's always great stories that come out of these things. But you know, I think it really kind of depends on the context. And I know that's such a, you know, I hope you'll let me have that
No,
one as the answer.
totally. Absolutely. Well, and it's funny
Yeah,
because every time I ask that to
yeah,
travel people and they're like, what? You can't make me
yeah.
decide. And I'm like, I know,
Just one.
sorry. But I
Yeah.
do have a kind of flip on this question that
Yeah.
maybe, and maybe you'll have multiple answers for this too, but I love this question is, what do you think is the most underrated destination to visit?
Hmm. Hmm. Underrated. I mean, some parts. I mean, like you look at the areas like in and around Croatia's blown out, but if you look, you go further, just out from areas, you go Eastern Europe, like, you get into anything with the stands, right? Yeah, you know, those are areas, Kazakhstan, like any of those areas. Um, I think underrated. Um, Again, it really kind of depends on what it is, the experience that you're after, right? You know, there's areas within Vietnam, there's areas within, you know, Thailand that are under, but there's other areas that are totally blown up. And so, and I mean, I tend to think of the areas that are maybe a little bit more difficult or perceived as difficult right now. Um, or the areas that might get politically difficult or almost impossible to travel to in the future, right? And so those might be interesting ones as well. But again, it's not for the faint of heart, right? You know, trying to get into areas. So um, I don't know. That's not really probably not the
Oh,
best
that makes
answer.
sense. I
Yeah.
like that actually. That makes sense because yeah, it's so true how it's, you could go, if you go to Vietnam, maybe you're going to this spot. That's the
Yes.
go-to spot. But
Yes. Yeah.
if you find your way this
Yeah.
area, or that makes a lot of sense. The different experiences that come with that. So that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting. You know, just trying to trying to do like even just like a known area. I'll give you an example. So I went to hiking to Machu Picchu, and like there's the traditional trek that goes up through the Sun Gate and whatever. But we found a small local company there, and it was, oh God, I'm trying to remember. Oh my gosh, now my brain's gone blank. The actual trail. Um, who's it called? The Moonstone Trek or something? I think, but it was a trek that went a completely different route, to the point where we didn't see any other groups except the odd local with, horses and donkeys kind of taking their sack of potatoes to market for 5 days camping. And so very different. So going to, and then when we got to Machu Picchu, it was like, oh my God, overwhelmed, right? Like it was over tourism but you still you did get your experience. But the real treasure was having had the small group local tour experience, which wasn't what everybody else was doing. So I think that's another way of looking at this, not so much for the unexplored destination, but looking at underexplored ways to explore
Like
a
that.
well-known destination, right?
Yes.
Um,
I like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
That's good. I like that. I wonder if people think of that. Like that's a good way to pitch things to clients.
yeah, there is,
That's
and again, we're looking at the show notes. I'll have to please, you keep track of me of all these
yes.
things that I've promised you. So I had an article on Carry On Queen that dove into the specifics on our trip, that I could share with you. It would have the actual details of what that
Cool.
was. But
Okay.
you can see the photos, and there's actually a couple of travel pieces that I wrote in the Vancouver Sun and Province about it, trekking to Peru and trekking in Peru and up to Machu Picchu, but it would be indicative of that underexplored kind of tour experience.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I just took notes, so I'll make sure to get
Sure.
that from
Yeah,
you.
just prompt me on that. Yeah, I've made a
Yeah.
few promises here that I haven't been keeping track of.
No, that's okay. I've been typing away. I've been
Okay,
keeping notes of them.
sure.
So another question here for you is what would you say is the best meal that you've had while traveling?
Best meal. You know what? Simple pizza in Italy, right? Thin crust,
Yep.
thin crust, simple.
I
Uh, you
agree
know,
with you. I love the simplicity like that.
wood
Hmm.
fired, fresh, right? Just absolute simplicity. I mean, I've had many amazing, memorable meals, but taking something that is, you think you've always, you think, how can it's just pizza, but when it's made authentically and simply, I mean, that would have to say that's probably,
Can't
just
beat.
from I, I'm a simplistic kind of person. Like I'm not a foodie. I love food, but I'm not a foodie in the true sense of like, I go searching for the amazing restaurants at the destinations. But I love a good tip on things. And so when you find something that is really just genuine but simple, it's something that really resonates with me.
I agree with you on that. That's yes. I love that answer. That's
And I'll
perfect.
reflect back on this and go, oh my God, I can't believe I actually
I
answered
know.
this.
Did you
So,
think that? You know, you're like, wait, how do I think about that? No,
how
I
about the
agree.
ceviche? How about that? It's like, oh my God, Mary, like I just,
There's so much. I know there's been a lot of times, by the way, when
yeah,
guests that we've had on the podcast are like, I should have said this.
I
Like,
know. It's just like, oh my God, there was like,
I know.
they're amazing. Yeah, it's like, no, just go with whatever was off the top of your head, because that's what I was asking for.
Exactly. Yes, the rapid fire. I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it. That's a perfect response.
Yeah,
But now the
in a small restaurant in Tuscany, at barreling along on a dusty road where you ended up a little bit lost, but you needed to regroup, and you chatted to a few locals, and somebody said you went. It's like it was one of those things, right? And it's like,
yeah,
okay, right, this is and you're sitting there having this in this little bistro table outside, and you've got a cold beer, and you're like, this is
this
just so good. Like all of a
yeah.
sudden, I don't care that I'm lost.
You're like, this is the life. Actually, this is the life. So
Yeah,
yes, no,
yeah,
that's amazing. Love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
That is great. So another question here for you is what is the last great book or article that you read? And it doesn't necessarily have to be travel. So I know you do a lot of the marketing. So if you want to put a marketing spin, you
Ah,
can.
My gosh. Okay.
Yeah, this is gonna be a hard one for you, I think.
Typically I've got a whole bunch of books on the go. I mean, I was looking at that. What's his name? Adam Grant. Think Again. That's no.
Oh
And kind of I
yeah.
picked that one up, which is just interesting from uh, thinking broadly, appreciating other viewpoints. Thought that was really interesting. I'm just sort of looking. Well, actually, I mean, Mark Schaefer, Marketing Rebellion. Okay, great book. The Most Human Company Wins. He wrote it a couple of years ago, but it's I'd say that's one of those kind of the ones that I kind of keep coming back to. I'm just sort of looking at my shelf here to sort of see, there's a bunch of things that are up on my kitchen table too. Um, oh gosh, what are other oh, you're stumping me because I read so
No,
many things, but I'm just sort of searching on the titles because I mean the marketing articles. I'm an info sponge on whether it be through reading or through podcast. What's another one? The Anxious Generation. Really interesting. I'm listening to that one on podcast. Uh, there's or not podcast, on audiobook, excuse me. Subscribe New York Times, Globe and Mail. I've just so many
there's a
marketing
load.
things. Uh, Forbes. I mean, I read a ton of things from that perspective. If I had my phone here, like right beside me, I'd go scanning through. Because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and like, of course, my brain is going blank, and it's on the other side of that folding door. Um,
No
but
worries.
but I typically will have two or three on the go, and I kind of listen for this one, listen to that one, finish one up. In the summer, then actually spend some time with actual hard copy books. Up on we have a summer cabin up on Nelson Island, and I find it just easier, sort of not just spending time just away from technology, and so that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Back up there too.
That's awesome. Well, if you do think of any other ones that you're like,
Yep.
oh, I should
Yeah.
have said that, you can just send them
Oh,
my way. And then I
honestly,
will
like
put them in.
I can give you Mary's reading list if I actually, my
Yes.
brain is drawing a blank here.
Mary's book club reading list. I love that because yeah, you have a
I would
lot.
have some good recommendations. I need to like to go it up because I've got my library up in the the bedroom, and then I've got my podcast or my audiobook stuff on my phone, which is not on my elbow, or I could rattle them off.
Yeah, you'll have to send us because
Yeah,
I would love
yeah,
to hear them too.
sure.
I love that. That kind of stuff is just so it's just fascinating and
Mm,
good and
mm,
really good stuff.
yeah,
But okay, I have one last question for
sure.
you here. So now this question is, what is the craziest thing that has ever happened to you while traveling?
Craziest thing. Um, well, I mean, there's been many. Do you want like the disasters?
Whatever. I know that's what not necessarily. I know, like give us the worst story ever. No, just the. I guess just
There's,
whatever you think
I
is
mean,
like truly like that was wild.
well, I'm trying to think of the time that my son locked the rental car keys in the trunk at the top of Pikes Peak in Colorado,
Oh,
and we
what do you
had to
do?
call. Well, I had a dying cell phone because he had been at a competition, skateboard competition, longboard thing, and talked to the park ranger. They're closing things down. I had to call AAA, and they sent a tow truck from Colorado Springs. But the tow truck got to the bottom of the hill. By then it was getting dark, and it refused to go up because of all the wildlife. And so then they called in a flatbed truck from Denver. So 2 hours later, and you have to appreciate the fact that we were in our shorts at the time. And then it was getting, it was dark, and that's below zero, or Celsius below zero, minus, below 32 Fahrenheit. And so we didn't get off that mountain until about 10 p.m. And because I didn't want to break the window. But I was on the verge of like, okay, whatever it takes, because then I
Yeah.
can hit the trunk, and then I can get the keys and whatever. Um, but the best part of that is that it was all covered in my AAA membership. So I've been a loyal member in my entire life. I mean, I probably got an entire life worth of value out of that one. I mean, I've had some crazy, it's been mostly with traveling with adult kids, kind of, losing passports, losing Nexus cards, locking keys and things. Um, like I said, I had a girlfriend. The tsunami warning in Nicaragua. That was probably the craziest as I'm thinking about
Mm.
this. So we were at a surf camp, a group of girlfriends. Uh, I play hockey on a women's hockey team called the Stanley Cupcakes.
Oh, that's so
Uh,
good.
total beer league, Duffers League kind of hockey. Think of it as like, like the guys' beer league, but for professional
Yeah,
women.
it's
That's who we
awesome.
were. And so we kind of got a little scattered after COVID, but we played for a good solid, 12 years. Some of us still spare. But we started doing, the Stanley Cupcakes, then the traveling cupcakes, and then just we called ourselves the traveling cakes, right? And so a group of us went down to this thing in Nicaragua to learn to surf. Um, and also to do some community service give back in Nicaragua because it's a you know it's a third world country. And so we anyway so we were right there on the fringe of rainy season or dry season going into wet season. And so they had this big massive thunderstorm that kind of moved through one night. And they had, I guess, their warning system for tsunamis, and it obviously one got struck by lightning, but we didn't know this at the time. So we were in these little huts down by the ocean, and these things didn't, like, there were no windows in the huts. It just had kind of wood that you put over it at night kind of thing. So this thing's rattling, and it's got palm leaves at the, on its roof. And we had netting to make sure there wasn't any bat poop going on the bed. Like it was kind of crazy kind of living conditions. And this tsunami warning went off. And but the wording, of course, it's all, it's in Spanish and whatever. And I'm like, okay, like I'm pretty sure this is bad, Michelle. We need to get up, right? And so my girlfriend was in the other bed, and so like we're just like, okay, think clearly. If we never see this again, what do we need? And so there was all this like, so it's like, okay, get your backpack. It's like, we need running shoes. Don't go flip-flops, because if we're hoofing it out of this country, we need some shoes, right? Your backpack, and you're grabbing, of course, your cell phone, various things. We joked with her later is that she grabbed her bikini bag. And it's like, oh my God, your bikini bag. Like, I guess it was in the bottom of the bag already, but we were just like, we joked later about, so what was in your evacuation bag? Like, once we realized it was a fake call. It was like, oh, she's got her bikini.
Oh, thank gosh.
But yeah, what had happened, but we didn't have, we'd given our passports to the guy to lock them away for security. Because like, and we had this guy with, like, he had a like machine gun who was guarding our, like the camp and stuff. Like it can have some rough stuff going on in that country. And so we didn't have our actual passports. So we grabbed our photocopies of our passports, and we had that stuff. But so it's just, and in the end, what happened, we figured, is that there was a lightning strike on one of the towers, and that had sent off the alarm system. But it was sheer panic and pandemonium. And as we all kind of went to this shelter area, and even the staff were kind of thrown off, like what to do, right? And we're looking around going like, I don't see any high ground. Like the highest ground is like out this little channel area and then up the hill. And like if there's actually a tsunami, like we need to get the heck out of here. And they're looking for the keys for some school bus to, it's like, oh my God, this is how I die in Nicaragua, right?
Yeah, like this is it. This is how it ends. Like,
This is how it ends. And this is the same trip where the girlfriend that had a scorpion in her running shoe. And oh my God, there's just, that was probably the craziest trip. And then because it was at the beginning of the wet season, the first rain, so there was the tsunami warning that night. And then the next morning, like, what we didn't know, I guess these crabs come out of the ground, like they've been in the ground, and as soon as the water comes, these crabs, like, and like the crabs that they go sideways like this, like whatever, it was like, and they were like all around on the ground. And like one of the girls said one of these crabs got under the door and into their
oh my
cabin. And
gosh.
so they had their suitcase, and there was this thing, and she
Oh,
said it was like Edward Scissorhands, right?
yeah. Ah,
It's this thing.
terrifying.
It's like it's gonna like chop up all my clothes. Anyway, yeah, that was probably the single craziest trip I've ever been on. And eye-opening from and we did some community service, helping out with in the soup kitchen, making stuff. And it was I think sometimes you need to venture to destinations like that to kind of make you appreciative of what a what a privilege it is to travel, but also what a privileged life you actually do have, right? But it also drives home, just how resourceful you can be. And I think taking yourself out of your own personal comfort zone is really super healthy. Being around others who are, have a different life and have many challenges makes you just more broad-minded and appreciative. And I think, um, and at the time some crazy stuff happens, but it always makes for the best stories.
Does like this. Well, and I feel like I've learned a couple things here. Well, if you're on top of a mountain, be careful of the keys. And
Yeah.
then also think about ahead of time, what would you take with you?
Yeah.
Last
Yeah.
like
Yeah, honestly. And I mean, that is one of the things I've always done is have a photocopy of my passport
that's
next to,
good too.
right,
Mhm.
with multiple locations. But also, just very much aware of where all this stuff is. Like if you needed to make a quick exit, like, what have you got? And always dividing up, credit card. You've got two credit cards. Well, one's on your person, one's somewhere else. So if you do need to ditch whatever I mean, these are just standard kind of tips and stuff, but at the same time, it makes you very much aware of safety. But I mean,
Being ready.
I have other stories, but that's probably the best one.
That is really crazy. Oh wow, that is. Oh, I love chatting with you. We could just be here
Yeah,
forever, just hearing all the stories. I love this.
yeah,
It's been incredible, and I just want to thank you again for taking the time to share your expertise with our audience. And I know there's so many resources, links that I'm going to be having for everybody. So really excited for that as well. But thank you again, and thank you to everyone for tuning into this episode of the Lounge of Travefy Academy. And of course, thank you to our special guest, Mary, for joining us today. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast or subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of the latest episodes. And we hope you enjoyed our conversation today and join us again. For now, stay safe and we'll catch you on the next flight.